Hello, this is Ken Ferry with this week's Boots in the Field Report. On the road this week, up into Iowa and Minnesota, but before we left, we had a busload of Australians stop in for a visit. It was a husband and wife couples that were on tour here in the United States, and they're traveling on their way up to the Farm Progress Show. We taught them a little bit about corn and beans, two crops that they don't grow in Australia apparently. And it was a good morning, good conversation back and forth, and they said the crops in Australia were poor this year due to lack of rain. So they started out dry and they stayed dry. Pretty concerned about their yields. Sounds like they're in the same boat that a lot of the countries are across Europe as far as the dry side, giving them trouble in the wheat crop and everything else. They were very interested in whether the American farmer would grow more wheat with the drop in the bean prices. I explained to them that you guys follow the money. If the market says we need more wheat, some of you guys will grow more wheat, then you will beans or you'll switch them over. If the market wants corn, some of you will grow that way as well. They were kind of amazed at the American farmer's ability to switch crops kind of on the go. Sounds like they're pretty much locked into their rotations over there. There isn't a lot of switching that goes on. I traveled to corn and bean fields in east central Iowa. Corn looks good. They did have some hail and high wind issues up there that will create some problems for yield and will tag for the harvest and will tag the yield some. For the most part, though, the crop looks comparable to last year. I would say maturity-wise, they're about 10 to 15 days behind us here. Beans look good, but I think on average, the yield's going to be average. I don't think the yield's as strong as what we were seeing down here for a pod count. Sudden death up there was actually heavier than it is down here. So a situation where usually we go up there and we see mainly white mold and a little bit of sudden death. I saw more sudden death in the fields in east central Iowa than I've seen down here in our own soybean fields. And they received 3 to 8 inches of rain this week with more in the forecast next week. So that could make harvest start to get interesting for them as well. From there, I traveled on up to southeast Minnesota and got into the fields also in north central Iowa. Southeast Minnesota was fighting more white mold than the state of Iowa itself. But beans there as well had sudden death, something that you don't see that much of compared to other years. If I group north central Iowa, southeast Minnesota, northeast Iowa together and pick the biggest yield threat they have in corn, it is going to be clearly nitrogen deficiency. Large amounts of fields that are showing some pretty significant nitrogen deficiencies. The large amount of rain that they received all season really took its toll on even the best nitrogen programs up there. I think got challenged with the amount of water that they just kept having back to back. Working with Joe up there at Osage, it was clear when he sent us nitrates down earlier in the year that it was going to be a problem, that we were going to have to take action. Joe had to bring in an airplane and apply extra nitrogen. At the time, Joe was choking on the extra cost, but now it looks like it was well worth it. Especially when you see the areas that the airplane couldn't get to under the power lines and stuff like that. It's going to be a significant difference where we added that extra nitrogen. All of these fields ran out of nitrogen about 30-40 days from the finish or showing deficiency. And of course, this is going to affect the depth and the tip fill. So we saw ears that were throwing the tips off pretty hard under that nitrogen deficiency. So again, we always say when in doubt, pull the nitrate. We could have got our handle on more fields up there if they would have been tested to indicate they were going to run out. Corn up north is about 30 days behind us. The wet weather continues to harass these guys. Silage chopping and trying to get fourth crop hay made is becoming a real challenge. Beans are also probably over a month out in most cases. I did see more sudden death up there as well. Something I've seen here in DeWitt County, as well as up at Cedar Falls and up at Osage, is the fields that showed the worst sudden death symptoms. So it looks like the whole field is probably dealing with sudden death. When we check the worst fields, We're finding both sudden death and brown stem. So the brown stem is usually more prevalent when we have cool, wet conditions during the vegetative growth. Of course, the sudden death comes in when we have wet and cool conditions at planting time, and then it expresses itself when we have wet conditions during the reproductive stages. And of course, that's what's going on now. So we got kind of a double whammy going on there. Usually under moist conditions, the bean can kind of outrun the brown stem, but unfortunately, under moist conditions, it tends to ramp up the sudden death. So Mother Nature is taking a swipe at the Iowa bean crop. The Iowa corn crop itself has dealt with more hazy days caused by the California wildfires that has been bringing that haze across them, so they've been struggling with that. Maybe because most fields have 25, 30 days left, they'll get that cleared out and get a good, strong finish. But if it doesn't, the stand counts are good, but they're going to need to be good to make up for some loss in depth of kernel. Here on the home front, moisture reports coming in corn in the mid-20s. So I expect to be able to get you a few crop reports here next week. To stay up to date, check out our website at croptechinc.com and subscribe to our podcast, Boots in the Field Report. Keep her safe, keep her moving.